In 1966, on American television, a black man asked a white man a question he was never supposed to ask. It wasn't scripted, it wasn't safe, and the answer stopped the show and made the entire studio cry. It was a Tuesday afternoon in 1966 at NBC Studios in Burbank. The Dean Martin Show was taping in front of a live studio audience. The energy was typical Dean, relaxed, fun, with just enough chaos to keep things interesting. Dean was in his element, drink in hand, charming smile, making everything look effortless. Sammy Davis Jr. was the guest star that day. He and Dean had been friends for years, brothers, really. The Rat Pack wasn't just a performance group, it was a genuine friendship built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and a bond that transcended the usual Hollywood superficiality. The show was going smoothly. Dean and Sammy had done their opening banter, some jokes, some music. The audience was loving it. Everything was following the script, hitting the marks, keeping the energy high. And then, something happened that nobody had planned. They were in the middle of a casual conversation segment. Dean was sitting on a stool. Sammy was standing nearby. The script called for some light back and forth about their upcoming shows, maybe a story about Vegas, standard variety show material. But Sammy went off script. He looked at Dean for a moment, his expression shifting from performative to genuine, and then he asked a question that changed the entire tone of the show. "Dean," Sammy said, his voice quieter than it had been moments before. "You call me brother. Do you mean it, or is it just show business?" The audience went completely silent. This wasn't in the script. The cameramen kept filming, but you could feel the shift in the room. This was real. This was happening. Dean's smile faded, not into a frown, but into something more serious. He looked at Sammy, really looked at him, and for a few seconds he didn't say anything, just held Sammy's gaze. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. In a television studio with cameras rolling and an audience waiting, that kind of silence feels eternal. Finally, Dean spoke. His voice was steady, but softer than usual. No performance, no act, just Dean. "Sammy, if someone hurts you because of your skin, they hurt me. That's what brothers do." The studio stayed silent for another moment. Then something extraordinary happened. One person in the audience stood up, then another, then another. Within seconds, the entire studio audience was on their feet, applauding. Sammy's eyes filled with tears. He tried to say something, but his voice caught. Finally, he managed 2 words: "Thank you." His voice cracked on both syllables. Dean reached out and put his hand on Sammy's shoulder. Didn't say anything else, just kept his hand there, solid and steady, while the audience continued to applaud. The moment lasted maybe 30 seconds, but everyone in that studio knew they'd witnessed something significant, something that transcended entertainment. When the applause finally died down, Dean looked at Sammy and said, quietly enough that the microphones barely caught it, "You know that. You've always known that." Sammy nodded, wiping his eyes. "I needed to hear it anyway." The show continued, but the energy had changed. What followed wasn't performance anymore, it was something deeper. Dean and Sammy sang together, a duet they'd done 100 times before. But this time, it carried weight. The audience stayed on their feet. Some of them were crying too. After the taping, backstage, Sammy found Dean in his dressing room. "I'm sorry I went off script," Sammy said. "I don't know what came over me. I needed to ask. I needed to know if it was real." Dean looked at him. "Sammy, it's 1966. The country is tearing itself apart over civil rights. You're out there every day dealing with hatred that I can't even imagine, and you needed to know if your friend, your brother, actually meant it when he called you that. You don't need to apologize for that." "I put you on the spot." "Good. Some things need to be said on the spot. Some things need to be said where people can hear them. What you asked me, what I answered, that mattered more than any joke I could have told." Sammy sat down. "Do you know how rare that is? A white man, on national television saying what you said. I said what's true. That's my point, Sammy said. It's true for you, but most people won't say it, won't risk it. They'll be friendly in private and silent in public. But you said it. With cameras rolling, with an audience watching, you put yourself on the line. I shrugged. You're my brother. That's not controversial. That's just fact. The episode aired 2 weeks later in November 1966, and the reaction was immediate. Some viewers loved it. They called it one of the most powerful moments they'd ever seen on television. Letters poured in praising Dean for his courage, for his honesty, for standing by his friend publicly and unequivocally. Other viewers hated it. They wrote angry letters, canceled their subscriptions to TV Guide in protest, called Dean a race traitor, a communist, worse things that don't bear repeating. Dean read some of the letters. Then he threw them away and never mentioned them again. I don't care if people are mad, he told his producer. Sammy asked me if I meant it when I called him brother. I do mean it. And if that bothers someone, that's their problem, not mine. The moment became one of those cultural touchstones. Over the years, it would be referenced in documentaries about civil rights, about television history, about the power of media to challenge social norms. In 1968, after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, Sammy Davis Jr. was interviewed about race in America. The interviewer asked him if he had hope that things would change. Yes, Sammy said, because I know there are people who see past color, who see humanity. I know because I have a brother named Dean Martin who proved it to me on national television when I needed to hear it most. What did he prove? That love is stronger than fear, Sammy said. Dean could have given me a safe answer that day, could have made a joke, changed the subject, deflected. But he didn't. He told the truth, and the truth was that he saw me as a person, as a brother, and that anyone who hurt me would answer to him. That's not just friendship, that's family. The interviewer paused, then asked, "Did that moment change how you saw yourself?" Sammy considered the question carefully. It changed how I saw what was possible. See, when you spend your whole life being told you're less than, being made to use separate entrances, being refused service at restaurants, you start to internalize it. Even when you're successful, even when you're famous, there's a part of you that wonders if you really belong. And Dean didn't just tell me I belonged. He told me, in front of cameras and a live audience, that my humanity was worth defending, that if someone came after me, he'd stand between us. Do you know how rare that was in 1966? How rare it still is? What did Dean say to you after the cameras stopped rolling? He said, "I hope I said that right." Can you imagine? Dean Martin, one of the biggest stars in the world, worried that he didn't say the right thing when defending his black friend on national television. And I told him, "Dean, you said it perfectly, because you said it from your heart." That's what people don't understand about that moment. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't calculated. It was just Dean being honest about what I meant to him. And that honesty cut through decades of performance and pretense and fear. Years later, in the 1980s, Dean was asked about that moment in an interview. "Do you remember when Sammy asked you that question?" the interviewer said. "Of course," Dean replied. "You don't forget moments like that." "Were you surprised by the question?" "Yes and no," Dean said. "I was surprised he asked it on camera, but I wasn't surprised he needed to ask it." Sammy spent every day of his life dealing with racism, with being told he wasn't good enough, wasn't welcome, wasn't equal. And even though we were friends, even though I'd told him privately 100 times that I loved him, that he was my brother, I think he needed to hear me say it publicly, needed to know if I'd stand by him when it mattered. "Did you hesitate before answering?" Dean nodded. "For a few seconds. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I knew what I said would matter, and I wanted to say it right. I wanted Sammy to know, and I wanted everyone watching to know, that I meant every word." Do you think it made a difference? Dean was quiet for a moment. I think it made a difference to Sammy, and that's what mattered to me. As for the broader impact, I don't know. I hope so. But even if it only mattered to one person, to Sammy, it was worth it. The moment between Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. on The Dean Martin Show in 1966 became more than just a television moment. It became a statement, a line in the sand, a public declaration that friendship, real friendship, transcended race. This wasn't scripted diversity. This wasn't performative allyship. This was two men who genuinely loved each other, and one of them asking if that love was real, and the other one answering without hesitation, "Yes, it's real, and I'll defend you." In 1990, Sammy Davis Jr. was dying of throat cancer. He was in and out of consciousness, struggling with pain, fading away. Dean Martin came to visit him, sat by his bedside, held his hand. Sammy opened his eyes and saw Dean there. He smiled, or tried to. His voice was barely a whisper. "You came," Sammy said. "Of course I came," Dean replied. "You're my brother." Sammy's eyes filled with tears. "You always meant it." "Always," Dean said. Sammy died a few weeks later. Dean was one of the pallbearers at his funeral. He didn't speak at the service, didn't give a eulogy, just carried his friend to his final rest. After the funeral, someone asked Dean how he was holding up. "I lost my brother," Dean said simply. "How do you think I'm holding up?" "You two were very close." "We were family," Dean corrected. "Not because we had the same blood, but because we chose each other." And when he asked me if I meant it, if I really considered him my brother, I told him the truth. And I'm glad I did. Because he knew. Until the day he died, Sammy knew that I loved him, that I would have fought for him, that he wasn't alone. The question Sammy Davis Jr. asked Dean Martin on The Dean Martin Show in 1966, "Do you mean it, or is it just show business?" was more than just a question. It was a test. A moment of vulnerability from a man who'd spent his entire life performing, who'd learned to smile through hatred, who'd been taught that survival meant making white audiences comfortable. And Dean's answer, "If someone hurts you because of your skin, they hurt me. That's what brothers do," was more than just an answer. It was a promise, a declaration, a refusal to let Sammy face the world's hatred alone. That moment, captured on film, preserved in television history, became one of the most powerful demonstrations of what real friendship looks like when it's tested. Not the easy friendship of good times and laughter, but the hard friendship of standing up, speaking out, and putting yourself on the line for someone you love. The studio audience that day stood and applauded because they recognized that they were witnessing something rare, something true, something that transcended entertainment and touched on what it means to be human. Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. showed America what brotherhood looked like. Not performative, not for show, but real, tested, and unbreakable. And when Sammy's voice cracked as he said thank you, and when Dean put his hand on Sammy's shoulder and kept it there, steady and sure, they gave the world an image of what love looks like in action. That's why everyone cried, not because it was sad, but because it was true. And in 1966 America, torn apart by racial hatred and violence, truth like that was rare enough to be revolutionary. Dean Martin called Sammy Davis Jr. his brother, and when asked if he meant it, he didn't hesitate, he didn't deflect, he didn't make it comfortable for those who might disagree. He just told the truth. And the truth was powerful enough to move an entire studio audience to tears. Powerful enough to become a moment that transcended its time. Powerful enough to remind us, decades later,
what real friendship, what real love looks like when it refuses to be silent. Sammy asked if it was real or just show business. Dean showed everyone that it was real. And that made all the difference.